How's it going, everyone? DBD has changed how you unlock perks for all of your characters. In this video, I'll be listing what I believe is the best order to unlock these perks in. If you don't know how it works, I'll explain it now. Perks will now be unlocked through prestiging. That's why it's going to be more important than ever to choose what order you prestige your survivors in. For example, if you get Dwight to first prestige, all 3 of his tier 1 perks will be unlocked for every other survivor. You can then find and level those perks up to tier 3 by spending points in the blood web. However, if you were to get Dwight to prestige level 3, then the tier 3 version of all of his perks will be permanently available to use on all other survivors, past, present, and future. In addition, you no longer lose anything for prestiging and are forced to do so every time you hit level 50 with a character. Now, this list is going to be heavily aimed towards newer players, or basically players who haven't life dedicated to DBD yet, so keep that in mind. I also have a similar list for killer prestiging that you can find in the description below. Alright, let's get into it. The very first survivor we have on the list is Claudette. As a new player, her perks are going to be invaluable to you. Her first perk is Self-Care. Self-Care allows you to heal yourself an infinite amount of times at 35% lower speed. That's a slow heal, but at the same time, if you're just starting out in this game, it can be really helpful to have this. However, combining Self-Care with Claudette's second perk, Botany Knowledge, is going to be extremely vital. Botany Knowledge is going to increase your healing speed by 50%, which is really strong, and if you combine this with Self-Care, you'll really be able to heal yourself in a decent amount of time. Claudette's last perk is Empathy, and in my opinion, this is actually one of the most underrated perks in the entire game because it gives you so much information. It will tell you where your teammates are at that are injured pretty much anywhere on the entire map, so you almost always have a good idea of where the killer is at and who is getting chased. Taking these 3 perks into account, I'd say there's no better starter character in Dead by Daylight than Claudette. Next up, we have Kate, and Claudette might have the best overall 3 starting perks in the game, but Kate has the overall best starting perk in the game. That didn't make any fucking sense. Now, I believe Claudette is the most well-balanced character to start the game with, but I do believe that Kate has the best starting perk in the entire game, which is Windows of Opportunity. Auras of pallets, breakable walls, and vault locations are revealed to you when within a 32-meter range. So this perk is going to do a lot for you, and it's not only a great starting perk, it's one of the best perks in the game in general. There's nothing worse than loading into a map as a new player and you have absolutely no idea what you're supposed to do. You have no idea where pallets are, you have no idea where windows are. This perk is going to give you all of that information at all times, and you're always going to know where you should go next, and it's going to help you really learn maps at a quick pace. Her second perk is Dance With Me. Now, Dance With Me is going to make it that when you perform a fast vault or leave a locker in a sprint, you'll leave no scratch marks for 3 seconds, and the perk has a 40-second cooldown. This perk isn't that strong by itself, but it's going to give you a lot of passive value without you even realizing it, and later on you'll be able to combine it with other perks to make some really strong combos. Her last perk is Boil Over. Your struggling effects on the killer are increased by 80%. You obscure the killer's ability to see hook auras within 16 meters, and you gain 33% of your current wiggling process if the killer drops off of any kind of ledge. Now, in general, this perk really isn't that great, as it's usually not going to stop you from getting hooked. It will annoy the killer a little bit, and here and there you'll be able to end a chase in a spot that's really inconvenient for the killer and you might be able to wiggle off. The reason you really want Kate is for Windows of Opportunity, and then later on you can use some of these other perks. In third place, we have Zarina, and the reason Zarina is in third place is because one of her perks is getting a massive buff in this update, which is Off the Record. Once you are unhooked or escaped from the hook, Off the Record activates for 80 seconds. While Off the Record is active, your aura will not be shown to the killer, and grunts of pain caused by injuries are reduced by 100%, so you're completely silent. On top of that, you will gain the Endurance status effect for a full 80 seconds, which will end if you perform a conspicuous action. An endurance effect will make it to where if the killer tries to hit you after you get unhooked, you will go into deep wound instead of getting down, so it'll keep the killer from being able to tunnel you as easily. On top of that, anytime you are unhooked, you will get 5 seconds of 7% haste, which will allow you to get a little bit of a sprint burst. This perk's almost going to be required if you don't want to get quickly tunneled out of the game and you don't want to have to rely on your teammates having borrowed time. But like Kate, this is really the only perk worth prestiging Zarina for. Her second perk is for the people. Press the active ability button while healing another survivor without a medkit to instantly heal them from dying to injured or from injured to healthy. You become injured and receive the broken status effect for 60 seconds and you become the obsession. So this is a very high level perk and I definitely would not advise running it if you are new to the game. Her third perk is red herring. After repairing a generator for at least 3 seconds, it will be highlighted to you with a yellow aura. The generator stays highlighted until it is fully repaired, or you repair a new generator or enter a locker. Entering a locker will trigger a loud noise indicator for the killer at the highlighted generator's location. Red herring can only be triggered once every 40 seconds. Nobody really uses this perk that I'm aware of, but this one specifically is really hard to pull off in solo queue because you might screw over one of your teammates who's actually doing the generator, so you have to take care when actually using it. Next up we have Mikaela Reed, aka the Boon Lady. And by far her best perk is Boon's Circle of Healing. Press and hold the ability button near a Dole Totem or Hex Totem to bless it and create a Boon Totem. Soft chimes ring out in a 24-meter range. Any survivors within the Boon Totem's range gain a 50% healing speed bonus and can heal themselves without needing a medkit. You can only bless one totem at a time and all of your equipped Boon perks are active on that one single Boon Totem. This is absolutely one of the greatest perks in the game for Survivor. If you're newer to the game and you can't find totem locations, you can put on something like Small Game, which is a general perk, and it'll help you find totems faster so that you can boon them. Once this boon is activated, everyone on your team will see where it's at. They can go there and they can heal themselves, or they can heal each other with an increased speed bonus. You're helping your team out so much just by running this one single perk. Her second perk is Boon Shadow Step, so now you can have 2 boons. Any survivors within the Boon Totem's range will have their scratch marks and auras hidden to the killer. This effect lingers for 4 seconds after leaving the Boon Totem's range. So now you could put both of these perks on and one single Boon Totem will have both of these perks activated on it. These are absolutely 2 of the best support perks in the entire game. Her third perk is also really good for new players, Clairvoyance. Now it doesn't exactly synergize well with her Boon Totem perks because it has you cleansing a totem, which means that you're destroying it. Clairvoyance activates whenever you cleanse a totem. When empty-handed, hold the ability button to unlock your full aura reading potential. For up to 10 seconds you see the auras of Exegate switches, generators, hooks, chests, and the hatch within a 64-meter range, and that's really helpful for the end game if you're trying to escape, but there's definitely value in it beyond just that. Up next we have Feng Min. Her best perk and your first exhaustion perk that I would recommend is Live. After performing a rushed vault, break into a sprint at 150% of your normal running speed for a maximum of 3 seconds, causes the exhausted status effect for 40 seconds. Live cannot be used while exhausted. You do not recover from the exhausted status effect while running. Now the reason I think Live is the best exhaustion perk to start with is because it's in your control and you're learning things. Even if you do make mistakes at the beginning, if you use this with something like Windows of Opportunity, you'll be able to always have an idea of what you should do. You can start putting plans together in your head, which will overall make you a better player in the long run. Her second perk is Alert, and I do believe that this perk is a little bit underrated. When the killer performs a break action, their aura is revealed to you for 5 seconds. Now if you're playing the game in solo queue, this perk can help you a lot as you'll quickly find out what the killer is if they get into a chase, or they might break a breakable wall that they don't like for later on in the match. And once you have the idea of what killer you're playing against, it helps you prepare for them. And there's no cooldown on this perk or anything like that, so you're going to be getting a lot of passive information throughout the entire match. Her third perk is Technician. The noises caused by your repairs and their hearing distance are reduced by 8 meters. On a failed repair skill check, the following effects happen. The generator explosion will be prevented, the gen loses progress as usual, an additional 3% progress is lost, which is a bit unfortunate that they have that in there, as I don't really think Technician's a very good perk. This is really a perk for basically brand new players and players that just really hate when they get off a generator and it explodes. I definitely wouldn't recommend using this perk, as there's almost always going to be something else that works out for you better. And as a small tip to new players, if you're having trouble hitting skill checks, just remember that there's an audio cue before the skill check. You don't actually have to look at your screen and try to hit it in time. Just listen, and when you hear the cue, you can get yourself ready to hit the skill check. Next up we have Dwight, and by far Dwight's best perk is Prove Thyself. For every other survivor working on a generator within a 4-meter range gained 15% repair speed bonus. The same bonus is also applied to all other survivors within range. On top of that, you gain 100% more blood points for co-op actions. Survivors can only be affected by one Prove Thyself effect at a time. With the increase to how long it takes to repair generators, I really do believe Prove Thyself is going to be an almost essential meta perk for completing generators. Unfortunately, this really is the only perk worth getting on Dwight, but it's just again so powerful that once you play with it for a decent amount of time, it'll be hard to take it off. Dwight's second perk is Bond. Unlocks the potential in one's aura reading ability. Allies' auras are revealed to you when they were within a 36-meter range, which is not a very big radius. It's actually kind of small, and I do believe that empathy is going to give you way more value over Bond. That said, there is a perk you can run with Bond to get more value out of it, but we'll talk about that way later on. His last perk is Leader. Leader increases other survivors' healing, sabotage, unhooking, cleansing, opening the exit gates, and chest unlocking speeds by 25% when they were within 8-meter range of you. Survivors can only be affected by one Leader effect at a time. This effect persists on other survivors for 15 seconds after leaving the Leader's effective perk range. Leader's not a great perk by any stretch of the imagination, but you do get a little bit of value out of it pretty much every time you use it. Up next we have Bill from Left 4 Dead, and Bill has two really important perks, the first of which is Borrowed Time. That means that after survivors unhooked, they'll have 15 seconds of increased movement speed and 15 seconds of the endurance status effect. Even with built-in borrowed time, even with off the record, there still might not be an actual better substitute in a team setting than borrowed time, as it's just incredibly strong. And it really makes it difficult for a killer who might be trying to tunnel. His second perk is Unbreakable. It grants the ability to fully recover from the dying state once per trial, and increases your dying recovery speed by 35%. You're going to be able to pick yourself up off the ground pretty quickly. Even if you already use Unbreakable, you'll still be able to recover 35% faster, which will help your team pick you up off the ground quicker. These two perks on Bill are some of the strongest perks in the game and two of the most commonly used meta perks. Now that said, these perks might not do anything for you if the killer's playing in a nice way, so you have to take that into consideration. His last perk is Left Behind. If you are the last survivor remaining in the trial, you can see the aura of the hatch within a 32-meter range. Now, Clairvoyance does a better job of this, as you'll have a bigger range to see the hatch from, and it also gives you other value outside of that, so I really would say Clairvoyance in general is just a better perk than Left Behind. But Left Behind has no requirement, so you don't have to destroy a totem for it to activate, so I guess there's that. I definitely wouldn't recommend using this though, and if you're really trying to use this to escape through the hatch every game, it's going to teach you some nasty habits. Up next we have Meg, and I know a lot of you are probably already pulling your hair out wondering why the hell she wasn't higher on the list, but give me a chance and I'll explain. Her first perk is Quick and Quiet, so any rushed action you do with this perk will be 100% silent and the killer will get no notification of it. So if you fast vault a window or if you jump into a locker, the killer will not get any kind of noise or visual cue. And this perk also has a really short cooldown of only 20 seconds. This perk is going to really confuse killers, and if you combine this perk with Alive and Dance With Me, you'll be able to create the Houdini build, which will basically allow you to completely disappear in a chase if the killer breaks line of sight with you and you vault a window. You would probably be shocked how well and consistently this actually works. Her second perk, and arguably the best exhaustion perk in the entire game now, is Sprint Burst. When starting to run, you break into a sprint at 150% of your normal running speed for a maximum of 30 seconds, and it causes the exhausted status effect for 40 seconds. So Sprint Burst is by far one of the greatest perks in the game, and the only reason I didn't put it higher on the list is because I do believe that as a new player, Sprint Burst can teach you some bad habits. Although Sprint Burst gives you a lot of value, if you don't know exactly when to use it, you might play overly cautiously because you don't want to waste it and you don't know when you should waste it. You can also 99 your exhaustion so you can use Sprint Burst when you need it. I'd recommend running this perk with Self-Aware. There is a skill cap to Sprint Burst. I think at this point, after you've leveled up all these characters, you should have enough experience to start using Sprint Burst and start knowing when to use it and when to waste it. Her last perk is Adrenaline. You are fueled by an unexpected energy when on the verge of escape. You instantly heal 1 health state and sprint at 150% of your normal running speed for 5 seconds when the exit gates are powered, which means when the last generator is finished. Adrenaline is on hold if you are disabled at the moment. It should take effect and will activate when freed. So basically, if you're hooked and the last gen pops, as soon as you get unhooked, you'll instantly be healed and get a sprint burst. Adrenaline will wake you up if you are asleep when it triggers. Just in case there's one Freddy player left out there in the world, there's a perk dedicated to just making his life a little bit more difficult. Adrenaline ignores the exhausted status effect, so even if you're already exhausted, your exhaustion will basically be reset. Now, as you can see, all 3 of Meg's perks are pretty good, and you get a lot of passive value out of them without actually having to put much thought into it. But if you understand the perks and you understand how to squeeze value out of them, they become much better. So although Meg is an okay starting character, she's really an exceptional character once you understand how the game works. Up next we have Laurie, and really her only important perk is Decisive Strike. After being unhooked or unhooking yourself, Decisive Strike activates for 1 minute. While active, complete a skill check when grabbed by the killer to escape, stunning them for 3 seconds. Succeeding or failing the skill check disables Decisive Strike. You become the obsession after stunning the killer. While active, the following interactions deactivate Decisive Strike: repairing a generator, healing yourself or others, cleansing or blessing a totem, sabotaging a hook, or unhooking another survivor. On top of that, Decisive Strike deactivates as soon as the last generator is completed, so it will no longer help you getting out of the exit gates. Decisive Strike received a nerf from 5 seconds down to 3 seconds stun on the killer when they try to tunnel you out of the game, which unfortunately is going to make this perk much less effective. And I'm going to say that it's going to make it so less effective that I actually believe that down the road this perk will probably be buffed back up to something like 4 seconds, as I just don't see 3 seconds being enough. Regardless of all of that though, Decisive Strike is still an essential anti-tunnel perk in the game. Even with off the record being as strong as it is, you might still need Decisive Strike in order to actually not get tunneled, as killers are very clever and they will find a ways to get around the endurance status effect. Decisive Strike might be your only way to really guarantee yourself a second chance. Laurie's second perk is Sole Survivor. Every time a fellow survivor is killed or sacrificed, gain a token. For each token, your aura cannot be read by the killer within a max range of 24 meters for each killed or sacrificed survivor. Increases your chances of being the killer's obsession. The killer can only be obsessed with blah 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 blah. On top of that, Sole Survivor will now increase your generator repair speed by 75% and your exit gate and hatch action speed by 50%. These 2 effects are only active when you are the last survivor alive. Overall, this perk is honestly pretty worthless, and outside of going for the Adept achievement, I would never ever recommend running this perk, as I think it's absolute trash. Her third perk is Object of Obsession. Whenever your aura is revealed to the killer's aura becomes visible to you and you gain a 6% bonus to healing, repairing, and cleansing speed. If you are the obsession, your aura is revealed to the killer for 3 seconds once every 30 seconds. This perk also increases your chance of becoming the obsession. This is a very high level perk. You really only want to use this if you are very confident in your ability to loop killers. Beyond that though, this perk will not work against killers who can turn themselves invisible like Ghostface or Wraith. They'll be able to see you and you won't be able to see them, which is obviously really bad for you, and you'll probably get yourself killed very quickly. Like I said before, her only perk you really want to go for is Decisive Strike. Up next we have David King, and his first perk is Dead Hard. When injured, press the active ability button to gain the endurance status effect for half a second. Causes the exhausted status effect for 40 seconds. Now this is a very high level perk. You need to really understand the killer you're playing against. You really need to understand how to run tiles. If you don't have a ton of experience, you're not really going to understand what this perk is doing for you. That said, if you do understand what this perk is doing for you, it's kind of invaluable, as it basically gives you the ability to parry the killer's hit, giving you a third health state. You'll also get a small sprint burst if you use it successfully. Survivors out there that choose to really master this perk and really get the timing of this perk down will get more value out of it than any other exhaustion perk in the game easily. It's why before the nerf, Dead Hard was the most used survivor perk in the entire game. His second perk is We're Gonna Live Forever. While healing another survivor who's in the dying state, your healing speed is increased by 100%. If the killer downs a survivor and walks away and you have We're Gonna Live Forever and start reviving them, you are going to revive them incredibly fast. On top of that, you gain a token for performing any of the following actions: performing a safe hook rescue, taking a hit to protect a survivor, rescuing a survivor by stunning the killer with a pallet, or rescuing a survivor by blinding the killer with a flashlight. For each token you earn when you fully revive a teammate from the dying state, they will get the endurance status effect for 10 seconds. Which, depending on the situation and the level of gameplay going on, it can completely throw off a killer's entire momentum if they're going for a slug. It can allow survivors to get distance. There's a lot of value in that. The perk no longer gives you the blood point bonus, but I still think it's incredibly strong. David King's last perk is No Mither. You are affected by the broken status effect for the duration of the trial. Your thick blood coagulates practically instantly. You don't leave pools of blood. Your grunts of pain caused by injuries are reduced by 75% at all times, and your recovery speed is increased by 25%, and you can completely recover from the dying state. So with this perk, it's impossible for you to be slugged, but you start the match injured and you can never heal. On top of that, if you go against something like Oni, you'll be bleeding the entire match and he'll be able to just juice your blood throughout the whole game and you'll basically screw over your team. This perk is a challenge perk. You put this perk on either because you're literally trying to complete a challenge or because you want a harder challenge. There's really no benefit to this perk. Even with the small things they give you, you're still going to be at a massive disadvantage throughout the entire match, and usually killers will not show mercy on you and tunnel you out if you bring No Mither, believe it or not. So take care when using this perk. You are probably not going to get a pity party from the killer. They're going to see you as a steak on a platter. Okay, the first row for Survivor is completed. I'm very confident that with the perks from these survivors, you'll be able to handle almost everything killers throw at you in this game. From this point on, the perks will become much more niche and specialized. Starting off the second row, we have Adam Francis, who has some of the most unique perks in the entire game. His first and only really truly good perk is Deliverance. After performing a safe hook rescue on another survivor, Deliverance activates. You now have a 100% chance of unhooking yourself during the escape attempt. A successful deliverance from the hook triggers the broken status effect for 60 seconds. This perk is extremely effective for almost any situation, but you can maximize the value out of it if you use it against a killer who's trying to face camp by trading with the survivor who's getting camped and then using Deliverance optimally. Pairing this with Decisive Strike or Head On can make for extremely strong combos. Just watch out for the Deliverance curse, because there's a good chance that if you run this perk, the killer will somehow find you first and make sure that you're not able to use it, so be careful. His second perk is Diversion, also known as Pebble. Being within the killer's terror radius while not in a chase for 30 seconds activates Diversion. Once Diversion is activated, press the active ability button while crouched and motionless to throw a pebble, which creates a distraction for the killer at a distance of 20 meters. The perk timer resets once the ability has been activated. The distraction consists of a loud noise notification and scratch marks. For the most part, you're not going to get that much use out of this perk, but very rarely it comes in clutch and can actually turn a game around or get you a save in the end game, so it can definitely create some cool highlights. Just don't expect to get too much general value out of it. His last perk, and actually my favorite perk in the entire game, is Autodidact. You start the trial with a negative 25% progress penalty for skill checks to heal survivors. So when you're healing a survivor and you hit the skill check, you're actually going to make their healing bar go down the first 2 times. For every successful skill check while healing a survivor, you receive a token up to a maximum of 5 tokens. Each token grants you a plus 15% progress bonus. Great skill checks cannot be performed while using Autodidact. Autodidact is not active when using a medkit to heal. So basically what this does is after you hit 3 skill checks healing a teammate, you'll start to get a massive progression bonus instantly as soon as you hit the skill check. And once you have all 5 tokens, you can heal your teammates almost instantly. So it can be really fun, and you can pair this with things like empathy to make a medic build. I'd highly recommend trying it out. It also works with challenges too. If you have challenges to heal your teammates, Autodidact is a fun way to go. Up next we have Quinton Smith, and his first perk is Vigil. You and your allies within a 8-meter range recover from the blindness, broken, exhausted, exposed, hemorrhage, hindered, and oblivious status effects 30% faster. Once out of range, the effect persists for 15 seconds. And now that Dead Hard has been nerfed, a lot of the other exhaustion perks are going to see a lot more value running them with Vigil. His second perk is Wake Up. Once all generators are powered, exit gates are revealed to you within a 128 meter range, basically the entire map. While opening the exit gates, reveal your aura to other survivors up to 128 meters, so basically your teammates will see you no matter where you're at while you're opening the exit gate. And while Wake Up is active, you open the exit gates 25% faster, which might not seem like a big deal, but when you're running this perk, you might be surprised how often it's actually able to save you and your teammates in the endgame. His last perk is Pharmacy. Pharmacy activates whenever you are injured, guaranteeing an emergency medkit when you search a chest. The effect can happen multiple times in one trial. So basically, if you get hit and you find a chest, you'll always be guaranteed an emergency green medkit when opening the chest. Running this with something like Plunderer's Instinct would be pretty helpful if you're not familiar with where chests spawn, but overall it's a decent healing perk, and if you make it out of the trial, you'll earn yourself a free medkit. Up next we have Jonah, and his first perk is Overcome, which I like to call the lazy man's exhaustion perk. When you are injured, you retain the movement speed bonus for 2 seconds longer. Overcome causes the exhausted status effect for 40 seconds. Overcome cannot be used when exhausted. So if you find yourself not really enjoying any other exhaustion perks, you don't really like to think about them and they annoy you, you can always run Overcome to just get passive value, because every time you go from healthy to the injured state, you'll get haste for 2 additional seconds, so you'll get a much larger amount of distance on the killer after they hit you. Now this doesn't work against every killer. Plague is going to have you injured the entire game, so if you're going against a killer like that, you basically have a wasted perk slot and you have to keep that in mind. However, Overcome does synergize with some other perks that we'll talk about soon. Jonah's second perk is Boon Exponential. All survivors within the Boon Totem's range recover 100% faster and can completely recover from the dying state. So if you get slugged and you're within the range of this perk, you can pick yourself up like you have Unbreakable if the killer doesn't pick you up himself. So this basically gives you and your entire team Unbreakable permanently as long as they're within the range of the Boon Totem and the killer hasn't destroyed it. For the most part, you're not going to see much value out of this perk unless you're playing with a coordinated group and you're purposely trying to make it difficult for the killer to pick the survivor up, but even then the killer can still snuff the boon out if they realize what you're trying to do. So overall, it's not that great of a perk. The only time I really run it myself is when I'm running a build with 4 boons on it, and basically just on the off chance that the killer attempts slugging everybody, we have that option to pick ourselves up off the ground. His last perk is Corrective Action. You start the trial with 3 tokens and gain a token up to a maximum of 5 for every great skill check you hit. When a survivor fails a normal skill check while cooperating with you, 1 token is consumed and their failed skill check becomes a good skill check. So basically what this perk is for is if you're playing with a friend who's like brand new to the game and they just can't hit their skill checks, you can put on Corrective Action just to help them out a little bit. But beyond that, there's really not much else to it. Up next we have Nia Carlson, and her first and best perk is Balanced Landing. After falling from a height, cat-like reflexes reduce your stagger duration from falling by 75% and reduce the volume of grunts from falling by 100%. You start sprinting at 150% of your normal running speed for a maximum of 3 seconds. Causes the exhausted status effect for 40 seconds. Balanced Landing cannot be used while exhausted. You do not recover from the exit, blah 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 blah. This is a really strong perk, but it is a little bit RNG dependent. If you're playing on a map like Sheltered Woods, for instance, there's literally almost nowhere in the map to activate the perk, whereas there are other maps like RPD where you can basically use this perk to make yourself completely invulnerable the entire match. This is one of the few exhaustion perks that I think are actually worth combining with another exhaustion perk to make sure you always have an opportunity, and it really throws the killer off when you do that. Her second perk is Urban Evasion. Your movement speed while crouching is increased by 100%, and you move pretty fast actually while crouching. This perk is really good for countering Hag because you can get safe hook rescues relatively quickly, and it's good for evading killers who are looking for you because you can actually use it to get around a rock so fast that even if the killer is walking around the rock, they might not see you, and if you're lucky, they won't hear you either. However, this perk is a little bit like Sprint Burst in the sense that if you don't have a really good understanding of the game, it might actually end up hurting you, as sometimes just running really early is a way better option than trying to hide. Her third perk is Streetwise. Reduce consumption rate of an item charge by 25% for you and your allies within an 8-meter range. Once out of range, this effect persists for 15 seconds. Now you can make some really mean builds with Streetwise and a toolbox. That said though, it does help you with other situations. You can use this with medkits, flashlights, toolboxes, maps. Pretty much any item in the game is going to be way more valuable running Streetwise. It's not a meta perk by any stretch of the imagination, but you'd probably be surprised how much value you can actually get out of it if you put together the right build. Up next we have Felix, and his first perk is Desperate Measures. For each injured, hooked, or dying survivor, increase the speed of your healing and unhooking actions by 14%, so this can stack from 14% up to 56%. Combining this with other perks like Botany Knowledge can actually be incredibly powerful. And also being able to unhook your teammates faster is something you probably wouldn't realize can be extremely helpful if the killer is proxy camping. This is a perk that belongs in every healing build. His second perk is Built to Last. After hiding inside of a locker for 12 seconds with a depleted item in hand, 99% of its charges are refilled. Each use of Built to Last reduces the amount of charges refilled by 33%. So you can basically repair your item over and over again, whether it be a toolbox, a flashlight, or a medkit, whatever, and keep using it throughout the match. Now you do have to spend some time in a locker to pull this off, and each time you do it, the amount of charges is reduced. But running this with something like Streetwise, who you just got from Nia, can be a devastating combo, especially if you use it on a toolbox to rush gens. Believe me, as a killer main myself, there is absolutely nothing more painful to go against in the game than a Built to Last Streetwise team running toolboxes. His last perk, and by far his weakest perk, is Visionary. You see generators' auras within 32 meters. Anytime a generator is completed, Visionary is disabled for 16 seconds. Now this perk is basically for newer players who are unfamiliar with maps and are just trying to get used to where the generators spawn. But even then, I would recommend using the new version of Deja Vu, which will show you the 3 closest generators that have spawned together, and also give you a 5% repair speed bonus to those generators. Deja Vu is a generic perk, so you'll have it no matter what. Up next we have Yui, who like Adam also has some very unique perks. Her first perk is Lucky Break. Lucky Break activates anytime you are injured. While Lucky Break is active, you won't leave trails of blood or scratch marks for a total of 60 seconds. So after you get hit the first time, this will start counting down. It'll also pause if you get hooked or put into the dying state. The faster you're able to heal yourself, the faster the countdown stops. You could pair this perk with Overcome for a really good combo because you can get hit, and if you break line of sight, it'll be really difficult for the killer to track you. On top of that, each second you spend healing another survivor will increase Lucky Break's duration by 1 second. However, the total time cannot exceed the starting duration, so if at the start of the trial you heal a teammate without using Lucky Break, you won't get 2 minutes worth of Lucky Break value. You'll have to use Lucky Break in order to start earning the time back. It's a pretty good perk, but it's very RNG dependent because you could be on a map where it's basically impossible to break line of sight, so keep that in mind when you're using it. You might want to run it with something like a map offering. And a very strong medkit so you can heal yourself quickly and keep the timer from going down. Her second perk is Breakout. When within 6 meters of a survivor that's being carried by a killer, you gain the haste status effect, moving at 7% increased speed, and the carried survivor's wiggle speed is increased by 20%. So this is basically the definitive perk you want to use if you're trying to keep your teammates from being hooked and you're running a Sabo build with like a toolbox. You'll be able to move very quickly around the killer so they won't be able to easily hit you. You'll be able to get in front of them and body block, and it will really make the person being carried be able to wiggle out incredibly faster. Using this in a team setting with synergized perks like Boil Over and Flip Flop, etc. like that, you're going to get a lot more value out of it than you would just running it in solo queue. Her last perk is Any Means Necessary. You see the auras of dropped pallets. Press and hold the active ability button for 4 seconds while standing beside a drop pallet to reset it to its upright position. Any Means Necessary has a cooldown of 60 seconds. Now this is one of those perks again that I feel like on paper you don't really feel like you're going to get that much value out of it, but you might actually be surprised if you run this perk for a duration of time how much value you do get out of it. There are a lot of killers in DBD who refuse to break pallets unless they absolutely have no choice, and you can really punish them by going to the pallet later and picking it back up, completely resetting the loop. Overall, Yui is a pretty cool survivor. Next up, we have the newest survivor in the game, Haddie. Her first perk is Overzealous. After cleansing any totem this perk activates, your generator repair speed is increased by 8%. If you cleanse a hex totem, your repair speed is increased by 16%. This perk deactivates when you lose a health state by any means, but you can always reactivate it by cleansing another totem. This perk synergizes incredibly well with perks like Small Game and Inner Healing, as it'll allow you to get a lot of free heals and you'll be able to find totems relatively quickly. 16% increased repair speed until you get hit is incredibly powerful and massively counters camping if you do happen to go up against a camping killer. Her second perk is Residual Manifest. After a successful killer blind action, the killer is affected by the blindness status effect for 30 seconds, and the blindness status effect is going to make it to where the killer can't see any auras for 30 seconds. So imagine a killer downs your teammate and picks them up, and you go for the flashlight blind but you mistime it. The killer still gets blind but they don't drop your teammate. Now they're not going to be able to see any hook auras for 30 seconds, so if they can't find the hook, there's a good chance your teammate's actually able to wiggle off. On top of that, this perk grants you the ability to rummage through an open chest once per trial and will guarantee a basic flashlight. So much like Pharmacy, Residual Manifest is a good way to farm flashlights if you like to always have a flashlight. Overall, a pretty unique and cool perk, but definitely not the strongest. Her third perk is Inner Focus. You can see other survivor scratch marks hit any range. Whenever another survivor loses a health state within 32 meters of you, the killer's aura is revealed to you for 5 seconds. So overall, you'd be way better off running Empathy, as Inner Focus doesn't really do that much for you. There's basically no reason to ever use this. Up next, we have Jeff Johansson, and his first perk is Distortion. You start the trial with tokens. When your aura would be shown to the killer, Distortion activates and a token is consumed. For the next 10 seconds while Distortion is activated, you do not leave scratch marks and your aura will not be shown to the killer. Distortion does not activate when you are in the dying state or in a trap. In addition, you'll gain 1 token for every 30 seconds you spend within the killer's terror radius. Distortion is a very underrated perk, but it does come with one caveat. Because the killer does not see your aura, you're going to be putting a lot more pressure on your teammates. That said, if you're using this in something like a Survive with Friends, it's going to give your team a lot of information, as you'll be able to know if the killer has a perk like Lethal Pursuer that allows him to see all of the survivors' auras at the very beginning of the match. You'll know if the killer has Barbecue and Chili, Floods of Rage. There's a lot of information that comes from running Distortion if you have a good understanding of the game and the killer's perks. His second perk is Breakdown. Anytime you are removed from a hook, escaped, or saved, the hook breaks and the killer's aura is shown to you for 6 seconds. A hook broken by this perk takes 2 full minutes to respawn. Now, this perk is definitely not going to do much for you most of the time. You can use this again with a team to kind of bully the killer and really annoy them, but for the most part, it's probably just going to end up getting you bled out on the ground, which again isn't that much fun. His last perk is Aftercare. You see the aura of every survivor that you rescue from a hook or rescues you from a hook, or you complete a healing action on or completes a healing action on you. They also see your aura. This occurs for up to 3 survivors. All effects of Aftercare are reset when you are hooked by the killer. So this is like a really strong version of like Bond and Empathy combined together, but you lose the effects if you're hooked. It's not a bad perk, but I wouldn't really recommend using it, as there are definitely way better options. Up next, we have Jake Park. His first perk, Saboteur, can help you out with a lot of archive challenges that have you breaking a ridiculous amount of hooks for some reason. You see the hooks of auras in a 56 meter radius from the pickup spot if a survivor is being carried by a killer. Unlocks the ability to sabotage hooks without a toolbox. Sabotaging a hook without a toolbox takes 2.5 seconds, and the sabotage action has a 60-second cooldown. On top of that, you'll also see the yellow aura of Scourge hooks while your teammates are being carried, so you can completely deny the killer's ability to get Scorch hooks with this perk, which is actually a pretty decent buff. It's kind of crazy to think that this might be Jake Park's best perk now. His second perk is Iron Will. Your grunts of pain caused by injuries are reduced by 75%. However, this effect will not work while you are exhausted, so if you use something like Sprint Burst, Iron Will no longer activate. You have to make sure that you're not exhausted in order to get the benefit of Iron Will. Now, Iron Will is a bit of a tricky perk because if you're playing a survivor like Ace who already makes a very low amount of noise, running Iron Will make you very difficult to detect, whereas if you're playing a survivor like Jane who makes a lot of noise when she's injured, it won't do as much for you. On top of that, you're also a little bit at the mercy of how good the killer's headset is. If the killer has a really good headset, this perk will basically do nothing for you anymore. So take that into consideration when running it. I think it will take some time to really see how much value we're still able to get out of Iron Will. Jake's last perk is Calm Spirit. Reduces the chances of alerting woodland creatures by 100%, so you'll no longer make any birds fly, which will keep crows from flying around in the trial as you're moving around. Calm Spirit also allows you to overcome the urge to scream, which counters Infectious Fright, a killer perk that makes it to where when they down a survivor, every other survivor in their terror radius screams. This also hard counters the doctor, and you completely get around the doctor's static blast now. However, in addition to that, you now open chests, cleanse, and bless totems silently at 30% reduced speed. It's hard to say yet if that's really a buff or a nerf to this perk. There are definitely moments where being able to cleanse silently or bless silently will be very helpful, especially at the beginning of a match when the killer's looking around. But on the other hand, there's times where this is going to be really annoying because you're just trying to boon or cleanse a totem that you really need to do fast, and you're not able to because you're taking way too long. Time that you could be using on something way more important. I think it would probably be better to just remove that penalty altogether, as I don't really see the point of it. The last survivor on row number 2 is Leon Kennedy, and his first perk is Bite the Bullet. When healing, you and the survivor you are healing make no noise, including grunts of pain. There is no noise notification on a failed healing skill checks, and healing regresses by only 1%. Believe it or not, running this perk with something like self-care or a med kit can actually help you completely disappear from a killer who's looking for you, as they just won't expect it if they hear you injured 1 second and then the next second you basically disappear. There's a very high skill cap to it in general. On top of that, it helps you out when you're healing your teammates, as the killer won't know you're there as well. His second perk is Flashbang. After completing 50% progress on any generator, Flashbang activates. Enter a locker while empty-handed and press the ability button to craft a flash grenade. It has 1 charge, detonates with a loud bang and a flashing light, creates a noise notification, and can be used to distract or blind the killer. You leave the flash grenade behind when escaping the trial, so you can't spawn into a trial with a flashbang, which I actually think they should probably remove that, as I think it would be kind of funny if you could farm flashbangs for other matches. The most powerful thing you can do with this perk is to just completely destroy Wraith, as dropping a flashbang on him is almost a guaranteed light burn, which will knock him out of invisibility and give him a good stun. There's little things like that, but overall it's usually a very minor reward for the effort you put in to get it. His third perk is Rookie Spirit. Complete 3 good or great skill checks while repairing a generator to activate Rookie Spirit for the remainder of the trial. Once active, you can see the aura of regressing generator, so this is basically a perk for solo queue. From time to time it can come in handy, so basically you're using this perk entirely to try to counter Call of Brine. If you run this perk, will you get some level of value out of it? Yes, but overall it's not really worth running. Kicking off row number 3, we have Jane Romero, and her best perk is Head On. While standing in a locker for 3 seconds, Head On activates. While Head On is activated, perform a rush action to leave a locker to use Head On. If the killer is standing within Head On's effective range, the killer is stunned for 3 seconds. Causes the exhausted status effect for 40 seconds. Head On cannot be used while exhausted. You do not recover from the exhausted status effect. Head On cannot be used while you have Idle Crow, so you can't go AFK control the killer. Okay, cool. Alright, Head On is a very unique exhaustion perk, but it's also very difficult to pull off, which is why it wasn't higher on the list. You really have to know what you're doing in order to pull off Head On successfully. It's best used when combined with a perk like Quick and Quiet that you can get into a locker, which buys you enough time to get it to activate so that by the time the killer gets to the locker, you can actually hit them. If a killer just sees you jump in a locker with a loud noise notification, you're almost never going to be able to use this. That said, Head On does give you some unique counterplay to certain killers, like Bubba for instance, who will often trap you in a locker with a chainsaw. This gives you some counterplay to that situation. Her second perk is Solidarity. While injured, healing a survivor without using a medkit also heals you at a 50% conversion rate. Solidarity is an okay perk, but the problem is that if you're using this in a solo queue situation, your teammates aren't going to know you have it and they might want to heal you first. So basically, if you and your teammate are both injured and you healed your teammate first, you'll be 50% healed after you fully finish finished healing your teammate. The only time you're really going to get value out of this perk, in my opinion, is if you're playing against someone like Legion. You're in a survive with friends so they know you have it and you can make builds around it. Other than that, you're not going to see much value out of it, and it might even get you frustrated if your teammates are wanting to heal you first and you can't tell them that you have this perk. Her third perk, and in my opinion one of the worst perks in the entire game, is Poised. After a generator is completed, you leave no scratch marks for 10 seconds. And yes, I know there's one guy out there in the world who swears that Poised is the best perk in the game, but here's my counter argument to that, and that's that every other perk in the game is better than Poised. This perk is so incredibly niche that the chances of you actually getting value out of it are nearly zero. Up next we have Jill Valentine, or in this case Claire Redfield. Her first perk is Blast Mine. Blast Mine activates after completing a total of 66% worth of repair progress on generators. After repairing a generator for at least 3 seconds, press the active ability button to install a trap which stays active for 45 seconds. Affected generators will be revealed to all survivors by a yellow aura. Only one trap can be active on a gen. When the killer damages a trap generator, the trap explodes, stunning them and blinding anyone nearby. Blast Mine is then deactivated. You can infinitely re-earn this perk in a trial by completing more generators. If the killer happens to not kick the gen, or if you finish the gen, you'll get the mine back and then you can replant it on another generator. It's a pretty fun perk to use when it works right, but a lot of the time you'll find yourself running this perk and the killer just never kicks the gen, which is kind of a bummer. Her next perk is Resurgence. Gain 50% healing progress instantly after being unhooked or unhooking yourself. Now, running Resurgence is actually kind of nice. You get a very fast heal off the hook, but you have to rely on a few things. One, you have to rely on the fact that you're not playing against a killer that breaks you, like Plague or Legion with a button add-on. You also have to rely on the fact that the killer isn't coming back to the hook in proxy camping, because if you get put into deep wound, you'll immediately lose the 50% progress. Keep in mind that the max value you'll ever get out of this perk is basically one free heal in a match, and I think there are definitely better options available to you, such as Renewal or Inner Strength, etc. Her third perk is Counterforce. You cleanse totems 20% faster. After cleansing a totem, you see the aura of the furthest totem from you for 4 seconds, and you gain an additional 20% stackable speed bonus to cleansing totems for the remainder of the trial. I like to use Counterforce when I'm doing archive challenges to cleanse totems. Outside of that, I think there are better perks for getting rid of problematic hex totems. Small game, Detective's Hunch, a map, there are just better options than Counterforce, but you can use these perks with Counterforce to cleanse them faster, which is nice. Next up we have Elodie, who has some pretty unique perks. Her first perk is Deception. Interacting with a locker while sprinting will trigger a loud noise notification at your location and cause you to leave no scratch marks for 30 seconds. Now you can use Deception by yourself to trick the killer running past a locker, breaking line of sight. The killer might check the locker or might not see where your scratch marks went, and you're able to get away from them. You can also combine this with perks like Head On, Quick and Quiet to make some really deceptive builds. Her second perk is Power Struggle. Whenever you are in the dying state, you see the auras of all available pallets. While being carried by the killer, reaching only 15% wiggle progress activates Power Struggle. While Power Struggle is active, you can drop a nearby pallet to stun the killer. Now, the problem with Power Struggle is running it by itself is very, very risky, as killers almost never walk through pallets while carrying a survivor because they're afraid that there might be another survivor nearby hiding who's going to throw the pallet down on them, or they're afraid you have Power Struggle, so they'll usually go out of their way to avoid doing that. Which means that in order to actually get the maximum amount of value out of Power Struggle, you need to combine it with other anti-slugging perks. Her last perk is Appraisal. You start the trial with 3 tokens. When a chest has already been opened, consume a token to rummage through it for an item. Rummaging can only be performed once per chest. You rummage through chests 80% faster. Appraisal, I only really ever use this perk when I'm doing archive challenges to search chests, because it allows you to search multiple chests in one match. Outside of that, I'd say there's really no reason to run this perk, because you're going to be spending way too much time rummaging through chests for items that are probably not going to be very beneficial to you. Up next we have Ash from the Evil Dead. His first perk is Flip Flop. While in the dying state, 50% of your recovery progression is converted into wiggle progression when you were picked up by the killer, up to a maximum of 50% total wiggle progression. Now, the best thing you can do with this perk is combine it with Power Struggle, so that if you crawl under a pallet and the killer leaves you there for only a short amount of time, you're able to get enough total wiggle progression that the second you're picked up, you're instantly able to activate Power Struggle and drop the pallet on their face. However, that doesn't happen too often, as killers very rarely slug in my experience, unless you're in a survive with friends who can delay the killer long enough for you to be able to set this up. That said, unlike Power Struggle, you can run flip-flop by yourself, crawl to a corner if you get slugged, and there's a good chance you might actually be able to wiggle out in time. So I see it as one of the better options for anti-slug. His second perk is Medal of Man. After you earn 3 protection hits, Medal of Man activates. Once activated, the next occasion that would put you into the dying state from the injured state is ignored. The next time you heal back to full health, your aura will be revealed to the killer when you are further than 16 meters from the killer. Medal of Man will deactivate the next time you are put into the dying state. So Medal of Man is like a 2-pronged perk, because you can use this perk for fun and you can take a lot of hits for your teammates and get it to proc, but you're basically going to end up throwing the game if you do that, because you're spending a lot of time taking hits for your teammates who probably don't even need you to take hits for them half of the time. That said, the absolute best players in the game, real competitive teams, do occasionally run Medal of Man and use it very effectively, so there is an enormous skill cap kind of hidden beneath the surface of this perk, but you'll usually almost never see it. His third perk is Buckle Up, one of the absolute most gutter tier trash perks in the game. The recovery progress of dying survivors can be determined by the intensity of their auras at a distance of up to 48 meters. When you heal a survivor from the dying state to injured, both the healed survivor and yourself see the killer's aura for a duration of 10 seconds. This perk almost just does nothing. Not only is it incredibly situational, it only really gives you any value in solo queue, and even then you're still relying on your teammates getting slugged, and it just doesn't really actually make much sense. So yeah, I think that this is definitely one of the most useless trash perks in existence right now, and it's in desperate need of a change. Then we have Yoichi from the Ringu chapter. His first perk is Parental Guidance. After stunning the killer by any means, your scratch marks, pools of blood, and grunts of pain are hidden for 7 seconds. I think this is actually a really strong perk, especially if you're running it with something like a flashlight where you're able to blind the killer and then basically completely disappear. This also pairs well with any perks that stun the killer like Head On or Smash Hit, and I think there's a ton of value and potential hidden in this perk that will slowly come out over the next few years as more and more survivors start using it. His second perk is Empathic Connection. Whenever another survivor is injured, they can see your aura within a range of 96 meters. You heal other survivors 10% faster. So this is kind of like a reverse empathy where your teammates see your aura and you don't see theirs, and they can come to you for healing. The problem with this perk is that if you're running it in solo queue, your teammates might troll you and lead the killer to you so that you can take a hit for them or to just grief you. So in my opinion, you're just better off running empathy if you're trying to heal your teammates, as the 10% faster heal isn't really worth it unless you're maybe in a survive with friends. His third perk is Boon Dark Theory. Any survivors within the Boon Totem's range gain a 2% haste status effect. This effect lingers for 4 seconds after leaving the Boon Totem's range. Now this is one of those perks again where I feel like you have to put a little bit of pre-planning into it in order to get value out of it, so it's a bit memey. And what I mean by that is you need to run it with something like an RPD or a game offering where you have multiple levels and the boon is going to cover a large amount of the map. Even then, it doesn't give you the biggest speed bonus in the game, so you probably would also need to run this with something like Shadow Step to make it just a little bit more valuable. Up next we have Ace, and his first and best perk is Open-Handed. Increases the aura reading ranges by 16 meters. Survivors may only be affected by one open-handed effect at a time. So Open-Handed works for you and your entire team. Any aura reading perk you are using will have its range increased by 16 meters, so you can use this with something like Windows of Opportunity to basically see every palette on the entire map. It's actually pretty effective. The best combo with it is Kindred, because if you or your teammates are on the hook, it basically gives you an enormous range of wall hacks on the killer's location at all times. It's a simple perk, but it's really strong, and if you're playing in a survive with friends, it's worth at least one person having this on. His second perk is Ace in the Hole. When retrieving an item from a chest, there is a 100% chance that a very rare or lower add-on will be attached to it, plus a 50% chance of finding an add-on of uncommon rarity or lower. When escaping, keep any add-ons your item has. So this won't work with something like a brand new part, because when you use a brand new part, it's gone. But with other add-ons that don't disappear when you use them, you'll be able to actually keep them through the match, which if you escape a lot and you like to keep your really good add-ons that you bring into the match, Ace in the Hole might be the perk for you. However, overall this perk doesn't really do much else for you, as getting a very rare add-on isn't that big of a deal. His last perk, and again one of the worst perks in the game, is Up the Ante. For each other survivor still alive, grant a 3% bonus of luck to all remaining survivors. Now luck does a few things for you in this game. It's a measurement of how often you're going to get a skill check, it's the chance that you have to pull yourself off of the hook, things like that. So you can use this with something like Slippery Meat to give yourself a better chance of pulling yourself off of the hook, but other than that it's very worthless, and just don't use this perk. If I see you using this perk, I will let you die on the hook. Up next we have Detective Tapp from the Saw chapter. His first perk is Detective's Hunch. When a generator is completed, the auras of generators, chests, and totems within 64 meters are revealed to you for 10 seconds. If you are holding a map that can track objectives, generators, chests, and totems revealed by Detective's Hunch are added to the map. Detective's Hunch is one of the most efficient perks in the game for getting rid of hex totems, as you'll no longer have to search for them whatsoever. You'll see their aura once anyone on your team completes a gen. Usually one of your teammates will complete a generator before you really need to worry about any of the hex totems. That said, the range isn't infinite, and you do need to pay close attention when it activates, or else you'll miss where the totems are at. Detective's Hunch is the comp perk for hunting down hex totems, so keep that in mind. His second perk is Stakeout. For each 15 seconds you are standing within the killer's terror radius and not in a chase, you gain a token up to a maximum of 4 tokens. Good skill checks are considered great skill checks, consume 1 token, and grant an additional 1% bonus to generator repair progress. So by itself, this perk is going to do very little for you. It's just going to make you do gens a tiny bit faster. I would personally use this with something like Fast Track, as with both of those perks together, you're starting to get a little bit of extra gen progress value, which seems to be the point of this build. His last perk is Tenacity. Your ferocious tenacity in dire situations allows you to crawl 50% faster and recover at the same time. On top of that, your grunts of pain will be reduced by 75% while in the dying state, so it'll be easier for the killer to lose you if they don't immediately pick you up. I feel like every slugging perk, I basically am saying the same thing at this point. It's a pretty good anti-slugging perk, and throw this on your anti-slugging build to have a little bit of extra fun. Up next we have Yun-Jin. Her first and best perk is Smash Hit. After stunning the killer with a pallet, break into a sprint at 150% of your normal running speed for 4 seconds, which is a little bit longer than other exhaustion perks. This perk synergizes with a lot of other perks like we mentioned before, parental guidance for instance. It's one of the more skill-based exhaustion perks in the game, but when it works you can get a lot of value on it depending on what killer you're playing against. Her second perk is Fast Track. Whenever another survivor is hooked, you gain 3 tokens. You consume all tokens after a great skill check on a generator. Each token consumed grants a 1% bonus progression for great skill checks when repairing generators. And if one of your teammates was nice enough to run Up the Ante, you won't be able to use this perk as often because you won't get enough skill checks to actually use it. Again, I will let you die on the hook. That said, Fast Track can be used on a meme build with a bunch of other perks that do similar things, and you do the gens a little bit faster, such as Overzealous. It's an okay perk, just don't expect it to change the outcome of any of your matches. Our third perk is Self-Preservation. Behavior's attempt to make a toxic perk that isn't toxic or does anything. When another survivor within 16 meters of you gets hit by a basic attack or a special attack, Self-Preservation activates. Your scratch marks, pools of blood, and grunts of pain are hidden for 10 seconds. Again, just a very pointless perk. If Self-Preservation hid you from Killer Instinct, it would actually be kind of cool, but unfortunately it does not do that, making it basically a completely pointless perk. Up next we have Cheryl from the Silent Hill chapter, and her best perk is Soul Guard. You gain the Endurance status effect for 8 seconds after being healed or having recovered from the dying state. While cursed by a hex, you can fully recover from the dying state, and you can do this in an infinite amount of times until the hex totem is cleansed. The effect can only trigger once every 30 seconds. So Soul Guard is a pretty good anti-slugging perk. Your best bet is to use this with Unbreakable so that you can pick yourself up at least once off the ground and get the effect if you do get slugged. Again, like with any slugging perk in the game, I recommend playing in a Survive with friends so that you can make sure you at least probably will get some value out of it. Her second perk is Repressed Alliance. Repressed Alliance activates after repairing generators for a total of 45 seconds. When repairing a generator while the perk is active, press the active ability button to call upon the entity to block the generator for 30 seconds. This perk then deactivates. Affected generators will be revealed by a white aura to all other survivors. So Repressed Alliance was basically invented as a counter to Pop Goes the Weasel, but because survivors never used it, they decided to just nerf Pop Goes the Weasel, so good news, you don't ever have to use this perk. It's basically completely worthless. What are you afraid afraid of overcharge, it literally does nothing anymore. Her third perk is Blood Pact. I hope you're ready because I'm about to read you a novel. When you or the obsession are injured, you both see each other's auras. After completing a healing action on the obsession, or having the obsession complete a healing action on you, you both gain a 7% haste status effect until no longer within 16 meters of each other. Reduces the odds of being the obsession. If you are the obsession, this perk deactivates. If you use this perk on a Wednesday, you won't get any value out of it. It's just a dumb perk. Why does it exist? It is so ridiculous the amount of things that have to be going on for this perk to even do anything, and then what it does is very low in the first place. This is another one of those examples where behavior has tried to make a perk that's strong, but the requirements to get it are so insane that nobody runs it, and you shouldn't either, because I'll leave you to die on the hook. The last two survivors on the list are Steve Harrington and Nancy Wheeler from the Stranger Things DLC. The thing is that their perks are considered generic perks now, so you don't need to prestige these characters to unlock their perks, so you're basically only doing it for their bloody cosmetics. And I'm not going to tell you who has the better bloody cosmetics. I think you can probably decide that for yourself. So there you have it. Obviously there's a lot more variety in perks when it comes to survivors, so there's probably going to be quite a bit of conversation about this list. But I do have a lot of confidence that it will serve you well. Of course, you have free will, so if a certain perk means everything to you, don't let my list get in your way. Survivor players in general gravitate towards different perks, but at high MMR it's usually only the same handful that you see. Keep an eye on the pinned comment for this video for any updates that affect the list, and as always, thank you so much for watching and have a good one.